For the residents of Ocean Avenue, the Amityville Horror started on June 28, 1965, the day the DeFeo family moved into their dream home on Ocean Avenue. The DeFeo family and their association with the Mafia turned the lives of the DeFeo family's neighbors into a true American horror story. The adverse relationship between the DeFeo family and their community would soon hit critical mass. A community pushed to the brink decides to fight back. After enduring years of threats and intimidation by the DeFeo family on Ocean Avenue, the residents of Ocean Avenue and powerful people in the town of Amityville conspired and formed an alliance known as the Ocean Avenue Conspirators. The Ocean Avenue Conspirators, headed by a direct neighbor of the DeFeo family named Andy England, brought in outside help to deal with the DeFeo menace. The outside help was the government mafia. The government mafia, headed by the evil Agent Simmons, murdered 6 members of the DeFeo family through the walls of their home while they slept with classified military weapons that can kill people through walls. The government mafia has the ultimate technology to target and murder people through walls without creating physical evidence. After the DeFeo family was murdered through the walls of their home, a 3-member strike team, led by Agent Simmons, entered the DeFeo residence and repositioned the lifeless bodies of the DeFeo family. The DeFeo family's bodies were repositioned on their beds, so they were lying on their stomachs with their arms extended above their heads, and then they were each shot with Butch DeFeo's rifle. The evil Agent Simmons personally murdered the 6 DeFeo family members, including the 3 children, through the walls of their home and minutes later shot them one at a time with Butch's rifle. Butch DeFeo was incapacitated through the walls of the DeFeo home before the murders with classified technology designed to render a person helpless for up to an hour. Butch, unable to explain his actions the night of the murder of his family, took the fall for the murders and became the patsy. Butch was convicted of the murder of his family, and he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Now with the news media and the public asking questions about the bizarre nature of the DeFeo murders, the Ocean Avenue conspirators are moving forward with the next phase of the conspiracy known as the Diversion. Unknown to the Ocean Avenue conspirators, is that Agent Simmons has his own agenda, which will soon turn the lives of the residents of Amityville upside down, and make Amityville a household name known throughout the country and world. The hoax begins. As with the elimination of the DeFeo family on Ocean Avenue, Agent Simmons will oversee the haunted house hoax to distract the public's attention away from the bizarre nature of the DeFeo murders. Agent Simmons will use his and the government mafia's connections in the real estate business to find a candidate family to be lured to the former DeFeo residence and tricked into believing the house is haunted. Agent Simmons has had a handful of families looking for a home in the area under covert surveillance, but only one family stands out as the perfect candidate family. This perfect candidate family has the last name of Lutz. Agent Simmons selects George and Kathy Lutz out of the handful of families looking for a home in the area. Agent Simmons believes George and Kathy Lutz have the right stuff to be used to create the greatest haunted house story in American history. The Lutz family is selected because of the strong physical resemblance between George Lutz and Butch DeFeo. It is also determined that the mental state of George and Kathy Lutz will easily allow them to be tricked into believing the former DeFeo residence is haunted. Agent Simmons basically considers George and Kathy Lutz crackpots that can be easily manipulated into believing the former DeFeo residence is haunted. Agent Simmons also believes that when the haunting becomes public knowledge, George and Kathy Lutz can be easily manipulated and exploited and used as a propaganda tool. George and Kathy are the logical choice for Agent Simmons. The real estate broker of George and Kathy Lutz tells them that she wants to show them what the other half of Amityville lived like and brings them to the former DeFeo residence.
Although the Lutzes have only a modest budget, the real estate broker talks them into viewing a certain Dutch colonial overlooking the water on upscale Ocean Avenue.
We first saw the house in the fall of 1975. Went over with the broker. She said, I wanted to show you what the other half of Amityville lived like.
Only after George and Kathy Lutz fall in love with the house does the real estate broker inform them of the house's gruesome history.
Only after George, Kathy, and the children fall in love with the house does the broker mention its gruesome past.
George and Kathy decide that houses don't have memories and decide to buy the house for a bargain price of $80,000. The Ocean Avenue conspirators meet secretly to discuss the next phase of the conspiracy. Andy England calls the meeting to order. The attendees of the meeting are all concerned about the excessive attention the news media is giving to the DeFeo murders, and they worry that a news reporter could uncover the truth about what really happened to the DeFeo family. Agent Simmons announces to the attendees that he has found a perfect candidate family and they have purchased the former DeFeo residence. The family's last name is Lutz, and we have had them under surveillance for some time now, Agent Simmons states. The Lutz family will soon be moving into the former DeFeo residence. Agent Simmons asks the residents of Ocean Avenue to make the Lutz family feel they are welcome in the community. Smile at them, wave to them, and say, "Hello neighbor," but don't get into conversations with them. They won't be staying very long. Agent Simmons explains that after the Lutz family moves into their new home on Ocean Avenue, we will use classified technology against them over the following several weeks to trick them into believing their new home is haunted. Agent Simmons guarantees that the Lutz family will abandon their new home within 30 days. The husband and wife's names are George and Kathy, and believe me, they don't have all their marbles, but they are exactly what we have been looking for. Agent Simmons insists the married couple is not dangerous, but they are oddballs, crazies, or crackpots, as Agent Simmons likes to say. The husband is intensely interested in the occult, which will play nicely when the news media turns their attention to the paranormal. Both the husband and wife practiced transcendental meditation. The Lutz home with those two-quarter-shaped moon windows that look like eyes will play nicely with the public's perception that evil resides in the former DeFeo residence.
The house itself had now become a personality, thanks to its distinctive top-floor windows.
Everybody would say to me, "What did you think about those two eyes? The eyes that watch you." I mean, I've heard this a lot.
They became the eyes of the house. And if you look at it, you say, that house is looking at me, and that gave it this evil persona.
Something's watching. Something's hidden. Something's watching.
Agent Simmons then informs the Ocean Avenue conspirators that he has personally done research at the Amityville Historical Society and discovered useful information. Agent Simmons discovered that the former DeFeo home was built on an Indian burial ground.
Supposedly, at least according to the book, this had been on the site of an old Indian burial ground, and people have surmised that some of the ghosts of these deceased Indians came out and played a part in the massacre that occurred there.
Indian legend indicates that tribal enemies were buried face down. The fact that all 6 DeFeo members' bodies were found murdered lying face down in their beds will draw stark comparisons between Indian legend and the DeFeo family murders.
The position of the 6 bodies bears an eerie similarity to the local Indian legend, which holds that tribal enemies were buried face down. An Indian curse, some say, may have driven Ronald DeFeo Jr. to murder.
The paranormal loonies will have a field day linking the DeFeo murders to Indian burial rituals once the haunted house story goes public. Agent Simmons also states that a devil worshipper named John Ketchum may have once owned the property the former DeFeo house was built on. John Ketchum fled Massachusetts around the time of the infamous Salem witch trials, and relocated to Amityville, where he continued dabbling in Satanism.
A man named John Ketchum, after being forced out of Massachusetts for practicing witchcraft, set up residence on or near the spot of Amityville's famed House of Horrors. It is said that Ketchum continued his alleged devil worship until his death, and that his body may be buried somewhere on the property.
Agent Simmons states that we have an incredible opportunity here to create a haunted house hoax that will completely distract the public's attention away from the DeFeo murders and onto the paranormal. Instead of looking for the people who had the real motive to murder the DeFeo family, the news media and the paranormal crazies will be chasing after dead Indians, ghosts and spirits. George Lutz is the spitting image of Ronald DeFeo Jr., and this will add to the public perception that paranormal forces are at work in Amityville. We will then entice the crackpot paranormal experts to become involved in investigating the Lutz haunting, and soon the public will forget all about the DeFeo murders. A short period of time after the Lutz family abandons their new home, we will move a local family from Amityville into the former Lutz home. The new occupants of the house will deny there is any paranormal activity occurring in the house. This family that moves into the former Lutz home will have full knowledge of the conspiracy, but will play along and deny to the public that anything is wrong with their new home. After a short period of news media attention to the Lutz haunting, the community and town of Amityville will return to normalcy and few people will even remember the DeFeo murders. Andy England has graciously offered us the use of his home again and we will be moving back in soon, Agent Simmons states. Andy England stands and tells the attendees that we are now free of the DeFeo menace and in several months, everything will return to normalcy, and we will have our community back to the way it was. Andy England tells the attendees to stay strong because we are nearing the finish line. As the attendees applaud, Andy England looks over at Agent Simmons and sees Agent Simmons staring directly at him with a suspicious-looking grin on his face. Andy England begins to wonder what Agent Simmons is hiding behind that grin. Andy England then adjourns the meeting. Agent Simmons and his colleagues have moved classified surveillance technology and classified sonic harassment technology back into the neighboring England house and they await the Lutz family's arrival. On December 18, 1975, George and Kathy Lutz move into their new home on Ocean Avenue with their 3 children, Missy, age 5, Christopher, age 7, and Daniel, age 10. Unknown to the Lutz family, they are under complete electronic surveillance through the walls of their home by Agent Simmons and other agents in the neighboring England house. In order to make the Lutz family feel they are welcome in the community, Agent Simmons gives a tray of cookies to Agnes England and asks her to go over and welcome the Lutz family to the neighborhood and offer the Lutz children treats. This is a common tactic used by Agent Simmons and the government mafia to ward off any suspicion of the neighbors, when bizarre events begin to happen to the Lutz family. Agent Simmons wants the Lutz family to feel they have warm and friendly neighbors when in fact it's the complete opposite. Agnes England walks over to the Lutz family with a tray of cookies and a huge smile on her face. Agnes England warmly greets the Lutz family and leans close to the Lutz children and puts the tray of cookies in front of them and tells the children, "These are for you." A short time later, George and Kathy Lutz begin to unload boxes from the moving van parked in their driveway. George notices something strange about the England house and mentions it to Kathy. George tells Kathy that the England house has all its window shades drawn on the side of the house that faces their home. The window shades were drawn to prevent the Lutz family from seeing the movement of the agents inside the England house. Agent Simmons hears George mention this with the classified surveillance technology and he will later raise the window shades to ward off George's suspicious mind. About an hour later, a car pulls into the Lutz's driveway. George Lutz immediately recognizes the driver as the family priest, Father Ray. Father Ray gets out of his car and walks over to George and Kathy, who are still unloading boxes from the moving van. Agent Simmons has been expecting Father Ray, and he has a very special surprise for him. Because of the prior tragedy in Lutz's new home, George asked Father Ray to bless his new home.
On December 18, 1975, 13 months after the murders, George and Kathy move in with their 3 children and the family dog, Harry. A friend of George's, after learning of the house's tragic history, insists that he get it blessed by a Catholic priest. Lutz, a Methodist, calls upon the only priest he knows, Father Ralph Pecoraro.
After a short conversation with George and Kathy, Father Ray proceeds into the Lutz home, leaving George and Kathy outside to finish unloading the moving van. Father Ray begins to bless the first floor of the home. A short time later, Father Ray proceeds to the second floor of the home. Father Ray enters the sewing room and begins to sprinkle holy water. As Father Ray is blessing the sewing room, Agent Simmons uses the classified sound projection technology to project an audible message at Father Ray. Father Ray hears a voice coming from behind him telling him to get out. Father Ray turns around to see who is behind him, but he discovers he is alone in the room. Another agent then targets the side of Father Ray's face and prepares to fire an infrasonic bullet at him. An infrasonic bullet is similar to an infrasonic laser, but it is a short burst of acoustic energy that also passes through walls without causing any physical damage to a house. The agent fires the weapon and Father Ray receives a slap to the side of his face by an unseen force.
I was sprinkling holy water, and I heard a rather deep voice behind me saying, "Get out." It seemed so directed toward me. I was really quite startled. I felt a slap at one point on the face. I felt somebody slap me, and there was nobody there.
Father Ray, unsure of what just occurred, quickly walks downstairs and exits the home. Father Ray momentarily stops to talk to George and Kathy outside, who are still unloading boxes. Father Ray, now in a state of shock, points to the bedroom on the second floor where he believes he just encountered a demon. Father Ray doesn't mention the demon but tells George and Kathy not to use that room as a bedroom. Father Ray abruptly ends the conversation, and then runs to his car and jumps in. Father Ray starts his car and floors the accelerator. Father Ray tears out onto Ocean Avenue, screeching his car tires as he speeds down Ocean Avenue. George and Kathy, not sure of what just happened, look at each other with puzzled expressions. Agent Simmons, observing from the neighboring England house, delighted at what just occurred, utters to himself, "Christian scum." Father Ray is driving like a maniac, weaving in and out of traffic, as he attempts to get back to his church rectory as quickly as possible. Father Ray believes he may be followed by the demon that attacked him in the Lutz home, so he wants the sanctity of the church as protection. Father Ray brings his car to a screeching halt in front of the rectory. Father Ray jumps out of his car and runs into the rectory. Shortly after Father Ray arrives at the rectory, a small truck parks in front of the rectory. Unknown to Father Ray is that Agent Simmons has another surprise waiting for Father Ray. Agent Simmons has dispatched the mobile unit with a sonic weapon in the back capable of targeting a person through walls and firing an infrasonic weapon that will evacuate the digestive system of the person targeted. Father Ray enters his room and immediately runs to the bathroom to look at the side of his face. Father Ray's face has the sensation of being slapped, but when he looks in the mirror to visually inspect the side of his face that was slapped by the demon, he sees no visual mark on his face. Father Ray now decides he must warn George and Kathy about the demon he encountered in their home. Father Ray enters his workroom and picks up the phone on his desk. At the moment Father Ray picks up the phone, a colleague of Agent Simmons in the back of the mobile unit fires an infrasonic weapon into Father Ray's stomach area. The beam of sound passes through the wall of the rectory and into Father Ray's stomach area. Father Ray projectile vomits uncontrollably all over his desk. Father Ray then looks down at his leg and notices excrement running down his leg, onto his shoe, and the floor. Father Ray drops the phone and falls to his knees. Father Ray removes his rosary from his pocket, and begins to pray. Father Ray immediately concludes the demon in the Lutz home has followed him to the rectory and is trying to prevent him from warning George and Kathy. The stench of vomit and excrement fills Father Ray's room and begins to penetrate all areas of the rectory. The other priests in the nearby rooms begin to gag as a result of the strong offensive stench. Priests normally associate the strong stench of excrement with a demon being nearby. Other priests begin prayer sessions to ward off the threat. Father Ray manages to crawl on his hands and knees back to the bathroom. Father Ray will be bedridden for the next 2 days, preventing him from warning George and Kathy. The Lutz family has now settled into their new home. Agent Simmons decides to attack the Lutz family dog, Harry, with an ultrasonic weapon to drive it out of control and make it act erratic. While Harry is in the backyard, Agent Simmons targets Harry and attacks it with an ultrasonic laser. Harry immediately howls in pain and retreats. While retreating, Harry jumps the fence but gets caught by its chain and nearly hangs himself. George hears the dog howling and is able to rescue the dog before it chokes to death.
Harry tried to hang himself, our dog, our black Labrador retriever. He jumped over the fence, and his chain was too short, and he was actually hanging on the wrong side of the fence, choking to death. That was all within the first hour of moving in.
Aunt Helena, the vomiting nun, decides to visit the Lutz family in their new home. Agent Simmons has an utter disdain for the Catholic Church, so he decides to fire an infrasonic laser into Aunt Helena's stomach area to make her violently sick to the stomach. Minutes after Aunt Helena enters the Lutz home, she experiences severe pains in her stomach. Another agent in the England house targets the chandelier above Aunt Helena and fires infrasonic bullets through the chandelier to make it swing slowly back and forth by an inch or two. Aunt Helena looks up and sees the chandelier moving and hears the magical sound of crystals touching. Aunt Helena grabs her crucifix necklace and begins to pray. Kathy comes downstairs to greet Aunt Helena but becomes alarmed when she sees her aunt praying as she moves towards the front door. Kathy stops her aunt and asks, "What is wrong?" Fighting the urge to vomit, Aunt Helena tells Kathy she can't stay and frantically exits the Lutz home. George has just come downstairs and sees Aunt Helena slam the front door shut. Kathy tells George to stop her, but George becomes frozen in place, wondering what just happened. Kathy runs outside to try to stop her. Aunt Helena gets in her car, starts the car, floors the accelerator, and then speeds away, screeching her tires as she tears down Ocean Avenue, just like Father Ray. Kathy, covering her mouth with her hands, watches Aunt Helena's car race away. George walks outside and asks, "Kathy, what the hell is going on around here? Is everybody going crazy?" As Aunt Helena is racing down Ocean Avenue, the government mafia's mobile unit suddenly pulls out in front of Aunt Helena's car, forcing her to slow down. Both the mobile unit and Aunt Helena's car come to a complete stop at the intersection. An agent of the government mafia, who is hidden from sight in the cargo area of the mobile unit, targets Aunt Helena's stomach area and fires an infrasonic laser. Aunt Helena, anxiously waiting to cross the intersection, suddenly begins to projectile vomit all over herself and the driver's area of her car, including the steering wheel, dashboard, and windshield. Aunt Helena manages to open the door to finish vomiting outside the vehicle onto the street. The mobile unit then slowly pulls away, leaving Aunt Helena behind. Both agents in the mobile unit begin to laugh loudly. Aunt Helena struggles to get out of her car. Once out of the car, Aunt Helena tries to brush off the vomit from her clothing, then she raises her hands to the sky and begins to ask God for help. Aunt Helena would never again return to the Lutz home on Ocean Avenue. Agent Simmons decides to wake George Lutz at exactly 3:15 a.m. each morning. At 3:15 a.m., Agent Simmons targets George's legs while he is in bed and fires low-level ultrasound through his legs. This low-level ultrasound passing through George's legs creates discomfort in George's legs, waking him from his sleep. George wakes and looks at his alarm clock and wonders why he keeps waking at exactly 3:15 a.m. George looks over at his wife and finds she is still soundly asleep. George later discovers that 3:15 a.m. was the estimated time the DeFeo family was murdered.
Within the first few days, George Lutz claims he found himself waking regularly at 3:15 in the morning, feeling restless, uneasy, and often hearing strange noises. Significantly, this was the time when the DeFeo murders were estimated to have taken place.
Night after night, George is snapped awake at 3:15 a.m., the established time of the murders.
Agent Simmons uses classified sound projection technology to project audible sounds at George that only he hears. While lying in bed, George hears his front door slamming, but when he runs downstairs to investigate, he finds his dog soundly asleep in front of the door. George hears the sounds of a German marching band coming from the first floor of his home, but when he runs downstairs to investigate, he finds nothing. George also hears the sounds of buzzing flies, screams, and footsteps, but he becomes frustrated when he is unable to locate the source of the sounds. Agent Simmons particularly enjoys waking George in the middle of the night with screams and slamming doors and watching George race downstairs to discover nothing out of the ordinary.
When you hear screams at night and you hear footsteps at night.
The front door slamming, and you go running down and the door's still locked, but you heard it happen.
Agent Simmons continues to wake George at 3:15 a.m. each morning, causing George to suffer sleep deprivation. George gets into heated arguments with his wife and begins snapping at his children. Slowly each of the Lutz family's personalities begins to change.
Fights break out between the normally loving family members. Slowly, each of their personalities begins to change.
Agent Simmons decides to use classified technology against George and Kathy, which will cause them to have nightmares and hallucinations. Agent Simmons targets the upper left side of Kathy's head while she is asleep and passes ultrasound into the upper left portion of her brain, triggering temporal lobe epilepsy. Kathy wakes from her sleep and begins to hallucinate. Kathy gets out of bed and looks in the mirror on the wall next to the bed and sees an old hag. Kathy's hallucination lasts for several minutes. The next night George is also targeted in the same manner. George wakes and sees Butch DeFeo standing right in front of his bed, pointing a rifle at him. George's hallucination also lasts for several minutes. Kathy is targeted again the following night, and she has nightmares of witnessing the DeFeo murders, as she believes the murders occurred.
While Kathy is plagued by nightmares in which she relives the horror of the DeFeo tragedy.
Another night George falls asleep in a chair in front of the fireplace. Agent Simmons targets the left upper side of George's head and triggers temporal lobe epilepsy. George wakes and looks at the fireplace and sees Butch DeFeo's face staring at him. George and Kathy's greatest fears manifest and come to life when temporal lobe epilepsy is triggered. George and Kathy both fear Butch DeFeo will escape from prison and return to his former home on Ocean Avenue and murder the entire Lutz family. Kathy fears old age. The attack on George and Kathy creates no physical evidence and they will fully recover in several minutes. Agent Simmons fires an infrasonic laser into Kathy's back while she is alone in the bedroom. Kathy feels someone touch her from behind, but when she turns around to see who is behind her, she discovers she is alone. Kathy tells her husband she was embraced by an invisible entity while she was alone in their bedroom.
Kathy would go to different rooms in the house and feel different things.
She was embraced by what she felt was someone, a woman. When she told me about it, she was quite frightened and quite disturbed by it.
Agent Simmons attacks Kathy and the Lutz children with an infrasonic weapon. When Kathy or the Lutz children sleep in any other position than on their stomachs, Agent Simmons attacks them with low-level infrasound. Low-level infrasound creates discomfort in the area of the body targeted and prevents a person in bed from falling asleep due to the discomfort. Kathy and the Lutz children find that the only position they can fall asleep in is on their stomachs, so they are basically trained to sleep in that position by this method of attack. When George sees his wife and children begin to all sleep on their stomachs in similar positions the DeFeo family was found murdered in, he becomes alarmed.
George becomes disturbed at the way his wife and children begin sleeping in their beds, the same position as the murdered DeFeos.
I would not sleep on my stomach, everyone else did. None of us ever slept on our stomachs before moving in the house. We later came to believe that's the position the bodies were in.
One morning, Agent Simmons uses a classified weapon against Kathy Lutz that fires a very powerful ultrasonic laser, more like an ultrasonic shockwave, at Kathy's waist while she is lying in bed. The force from this powerful ultrasonic laser lifts Kathy's waist off the bed by several inches and pushes her to the end of the bed. George witnesses his wife levitate off the bed and goes into a state of shock.
And during that night, she actually lifted up a little bit off the bed, about 3-4 inches, and started to slide away from me, and I grabbed her before she went off the bed.
George, having just seen the movie The Exorcist, immediately concludes that a supernatural force has just lifted his wife off the bed. One night, Agent Simmons uses 2 red light lasers to create 2 red dots on a window pane of a room in the Lutz home. As soon as George and Kathy enter the room, Agent Simmons turns on the red lasers and 2 dots appear on the Lutz's window pane. As soon as Agent Simmons sees George and Kathy react to the 2 red dots on the window, Agent Simmons moves the red lasers off the window and turns the red lasers off. George runs over to the window and looks out, but he sees nothing unusual outside. George and Kathy believe that a demonic pig with glowing red eyes, which they would later name Jody the Flying Pig, was looking into their home.
There were a couple of times that we saw eyes from the outside looking into the house.
Agent Simmons decides to relocate to the England's boathouse so he can project red laser dots on Missy's bedroom window as George Lutz is walking back from his boathouse. One night, George Lutz closes the doors on his boathouse and turns around to walk back to his home, and he looks up and sees 2 bright red eyes on Missy's bedroom window. George, believing that Jody the Flying Pig has gotten into his home, rushes back inside and races upstairs to Missy's bedroom, but when he enters Missy's bedroom, he finds his daughter soundly asleep and no one else in the room.
I saw eyes looking down at me from Missy's bedroom window when I would be coming back from the boathouse at night. I would run into the house, run upstairs, and there'd be nothing there.
Agent Simmons begins to manipulate George and Kathy's 5-year-old daughter, Missy. Agent Simmons uses the classified sound projection technology to project audible messages at Missy and uses the surveillance technology to see and hear Missy's response. Agent Simmons has established a 2-way conversation with Missy, and he manipulates the little girl into believing that Jody is her invisible friend.
Hello, Missy. This is Jody. Let's be friends.
Jody tells Missy she will live in the house forever. Jody also has Missy sing songs in her room and tells her to never sing the songs outside her room. George and Kathy become alarmed when Missy begins to describe her new friend named Jody.
They were also becoming increasingly anxious about the behavior of their daughter Missy.
Missy started to explain to Kathy that she had a friend, the friend's name was Jody, that it represented itself to her as a large pig. When Jody told her that he was glad she was there and she was going to be living there forever, that was quite disturbing.
5-year-old Missy, who boasts about her new imaginary playmate, Jody.
I recall one morning I was in the kitchen and Melissa came in and she said to me, "Mommy, do angels talk?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." "Why?" And she said, "Well, I think I have an angel in my room."
Missy described it as a pig that had the ability to be very big or very small, invisible or visible. But Missy would say things about it that it said that you knew she couldn't make up on her own. One of the most uncomfortable statements that Jody made was, "You will always live here." That's not something that makes you comfortable to hear your child's invisible friend is saying that.
Agent Simmons fires a sonic laser through the headrest of Missy's rocking chair, causing it to rock back and forth on its own. George sees the rocking chair rocking on its own and goes into a state of shock. George picks up the rocking chair and asks, "How is it doing that?"
There would be times that Missy would be sitting on her bed talking, and you'd walk past, and you'd see the rocking chair moving, but Missy was on the bed.
Agent Simmons uses a more powerful version of the sound projection technology to project audible sound through the walls of the Lutz home. The sound projected by this device can fill a room with audible sound. George and Kathy hear screams, voices, and other bizarre sounds coming from inside their home. George and Kathy search their home, but they can't find the source of the sounds. Agent Simmons uses the powerful sound projection technology to project audible sounds outside the Lutz home. George and Kathy hear sounds of wind, storms, and lightning coming from outside their home, but when George and Kathy look out the window, it's a clear day.
There's a storm outside which only we can hear in the house. And the wind is raging, but the lights stay on, thank God. Never went off, never blinked.
Agent Simmons further plays with George and Kathy by projecting sounds of low-frequency rumbling and electric arcs outside the Lutz home. One night while Kathy and Missy are alone in Missy's bedroom, Agent Simmons projects 2 red dots on Missy's bedroom window. Agent Simmons is looking for a hostile reaction from Kathy. Agent Simmons has another agent standing by with the sound projection technology. Kathy looks over at the window and sees the 2 red eyes looking into her daughter's bedroom, and Kathy loses it. Kathy picks up Missy's rocking chair and throws it against the window and screams, "Stay away from my daughter." The window shatters. At that instant, the agent plays a recording. After the window shatters, Kathy sees the red eyes suddenly disappear, and she then hears a loud sound of a squealing pig outside her home. George comes running into the room, and Kathy frantically tells her husband, "Jody is after our daughter." George and Kathy search outside their home but find nothing unusual but the shattered window in Missy's room. The next day, Agent Simmons fires sonic lasers at objects on tables to knock the objects to the floor. George and Kathy see these objects fly off the tables on their own. With the classified surveillance technology, Agent Simmons can tell exactly when all members of the Lutz family are in their beds and soundly asleep. Agent Simmons and his colleagues will exit the England house and enter the Lutz home while the Lutz family is soundly asleep. The Lutz family dog will be incapacitated by a directed energy weapon to keep the dog from waking the family. Agent Simmons and his colleagues advance to the Lutz home. After entering the Lutz home, Agent Simmons and his colleagues move furniture, place droplets of green slime in the hallway, open windows, put black dye in a toilet, and turn a crucifix upside down. Should any member of the Lutz family awake while Agent Simmons and his colleagues are in the Lutz home, the family member can be incapacitated by a directed energy weapon before even having a chance to get out of bed. Agent Simmons and his colleagues exit the Lutz home, lock the door behind them, and return to the England house. When the Lutz family wakes in the morning, they find certain things in their home are not the same as when they went to sleep. In the morning, George finds green slime in the hallway near the bedrooms and can't discover where it came from.
The slime was like gelatin, like drops of gelatin on the carpet going from room to room.
One of the Lutz's children flushes the toilet, and the toilet fills with a black substance. George and Kathy find windows open in the house, which were closed before they went to sleep. George and Kathy find their furniture in the living room rearranged. George and Kathy both go into shock when they discover a crucifix upside down in their living room. George and Kathy look at each other and ask, "What is going on here?" One night while the Lutz family is soundly asleep, Agent Simmons puts on a very special pair of shoes and takes a walk around the snow-covered Lutz property. Agent Simmons' special shoes are shoes that don't leave ordinary footprints but leave what appear to be animal tracks. Agent Simmons walks from the Lutz boathouse to the side of the Lutz home and back to the boathouse. In the morning, George Lutz discovers the animal tracks in the snow and immediately jumps to the conclusion that Jody the flying pig paid a visit during the night.
There were tracks in the snow that were made by something with a cloven hoof.
Another night, Agent Simmons tampers with George Lutz's van while the Lutz family is soundly asleep. George experiences unusual trouble with his van. While George is driving to work the next day, his tire starts wobbling because of loose lug nuts. After George tightens the lug nuts and proceeds to work, a few miles later a shock absorber falls off because of loose bolts. While the Lutz family is away from their home, Agent Simmons and his colleagues have free rein in the Lutz home. Agent Simmons puts flies in the sewing room and chemicals in areas of the house to create nasty odors. Agent Simmons and his colleagues are quickly in and out of the Lutz home. When the Lutz family returns home, strange occurrences plague the family. George is baffled by the swarming flies in the sewing room in the middle of winter, and the foul odors emanating from his home begin to sicken him.
The Lutzes reported swarms of houseflies infesting certain rooms, highly unusual in midwinter.
Infestation of flies in the dead of winter.
When we first looked at the house, very first time, we noticed no flies anywhere in the house. Especially when you think back now, they were limited, in particular, to the sewing room second floor. Same bedroom that Father Ray had asked us not to use as a bedroom. The longer we were in the house, the more flies there were in that room. I don't have an explanation for how or why, but that's where they were.
George and Kathy Lutz discover a small hidden room in the basement, which they name the Red Room. After George and Kathy open the entrance to the Red Room, Agent Simmons fires an ultrasonic laser at the Lutz family dog, Harry, who is several feet away from them. As soon as George and Kathy open the entrance, Harry goes crazy and retreats from the Red Room. George and Kathy are unaffected by the ultrasonic laser. George and Kathy are baffled at Harry's reaction as they watch their dog retreat up the basement stairs.
Then when Harry, our black lab, wouldn't go near the room, cowered away from it, that was more disturbing.
George and Kathy let the family dog, Harry, sleep in their bedroom one night. That night, Agent Simmons attacks Harry with an infrasonic weapon in the bedroom, causing the dog to act erratic and vomit all over the floor.
We brought Harry up and tied him to the bedroom door. Because he was useless at the front door. You'd hear the front door slam in the middle of the night. It was a very distinct sound. And he'd be asleep right at the front door. So I figured, okay, we'll bring him up upstairs. After the stuff that went on the night before, the screams and all the different things that were on, we wanted to have him right there with us. Harry is walking in circles, puking, laying down, walking in circles, puking.
Agent Simmons has tapped the Lutz's phone line. When George and Kathy Lutz attempt to contact Father Ray by phone, Agent Simmons interrupts the phone call and makes the line go to static. When Father Ray attempts to call George and Kathy, he is cut off by Agent Simmons as soon as the call is answered.
After failing to cast the evil presence out of the house on Ocean Avenue, the Lutzes attempt to seek help from Father Ray, the Catholic priest who first came to bless the house, but find their efforts to reach him thwarted by some unknown force.
And each time I would attempt that call, that contact, he would run into interference on the phone. There were times when Father Ray would attempt to call us, and the connection again would be broken up with static.
Father Ray attempts to call George and Kathy to let them know he will be returning to their home with a fellow priest to bless their home for a second time. Kathy hears Father Ray on the phone, but Agent Simmons makes the line go to static and is cut off before Father Ray's intention to return can be heard. Agent Simmons, now knowing Father Ray's intention to return to the Lutz home, decides to arrange a little mishap for Father Ray and his companion. Agent Simmons dispatches a colleague to make some adjustments to Father Ray's car that is parked at the rectory. In the middle of the night before Father Ray's planned return to the Lutz home, the agent makes some modifications to Father Ray's car. The agent loosens the steering linkage and then loosens the bolts of the hood latch. In the morning, Father Ray, still not fully recovered from what he believes was a battle with a demon, allows Father Boland to drive. As the priests are traveling en route to the Lutz home, Father Boland suddenly finds he cannot steer the car. As the car is swerving in and out of traffic, the hood of the car suddenly flies up and folds over the windshield. Father Boland narrowly avoids a serious accident by allowing the car to jump the curb and come to a stop on an embankment. Father Ray is as white as a ghost, clutching his rosary and praying. Father Ray turns to his fellow priest and tells him this demon is too powerful to battle. Father Ray, nearly escaping death, returns to the rectory with his car in tow. Father Ray pays the tow truck driver and then rushes back to his room. After Father Ray enters the rectory, the government mafia's mobile unit slowly pulls up in front of the rectory. Father Ray enters his room and decides to attempt to phone George and Kathy again. Father Ray picks up the phone. The agent in the back of the mobile unit sees Father Ray pick up the phone with the classified surveillance technology. The agent targets Father Ray's face and fires a directed energy weapon that will temporarily blind Father Ray. As Father Ray attempts to dial the phone, his vision suddenly goes all white. Father Ray drops the phone and uses both his hands to cover his eyes and begins screaming, "Oh God, I'm blind. I can't see."
I'm blind.
Father Ray begins stumbling around his room, bumping into furniture and falling to the floor. After hearing Father Ray's screams, Father Boland comes running into the room. Father Boland manages to get Father Ray back on his feet. Father Ray tells Father Boland that he can't see a thing because the demon from the Lutz home has blinded him. Father Ray and Father Boland begin to pray together for several minutes. Suddenly, Father Ray's vision slowly returns. Father Ray thanks God for the miracle of returning his eyesight. Father Ray informs Father Boland that this demon is too powerful for him to battle, and he must abandon all efforts to bless the Lutz home. Father Ray will never again return to 112 Ocean Avenue. Back on Ocean Avenue, Agent Simmons further plays with Kathy Lutz. While Kathy is in the kitchen, Agent Simmons gives his colleague a six-pack of beer and sends him over to knock on the Lutz's kitchen door. The agent, holding the six-pack of beer, knocks on the door and Kathy quickly answers. The agent tells Kathy, "Everyone wanted to come over and welcome you to the neighborhood." At that moment, Agent Simmons rings the Lutz's kitchen phone. Kathy asks the stranger to wait while she goes to answer the phone. As soon as Kathy leaves the door, the agent quickly walks away and returns to the England house. Kathy answers the phone, but Agent Simmons makes the line go to static. Kathy, frustrated, hangs up the phone and returns to the door but finds the stranger gone. Kathy opens the door and looks around outside but finds no one. Kathy asks, "What is going on around here?" Kathy never sees the stranger again. George and Kathy Lutz are unable to reach Father Ray by phone, so they attempt to bless their home on their own. George, holding a crucifix, goes throughout his home with Kathy both reciting the Lord's Prayer. Agent Simmons decides to use the powerful sound projection technology to fill a room on the second floor of the Lutz's home with an audible sound. While blessing the living room, George and Kathy hear a chorus of voices coming from upstairs asking them, "Will you stop? Will you stop?" George and Kathy decide to continue with the blessing, despite the voices asking them to stop. Agent Simmons then targets Kathy's head and fires low-level ultrasound. Kathy experiences severe head pains and her ears start to ring. George is unaffected. Because of Kathy's pain, the blessing is discontinued.
Desperate to rid their home of the diabolical presence, the Lutzes are advised by a friend to first open all of the windows throughout the house, and then go from room to room reciting the Lord's Prayer.
Sounded like a solution to us. We did the same thing. When we did that, we heard a chorus of voices say to us, "Will you stop?" I believe that's one of the things that we did that caused the presence there to become less than happy with us.
Agent Simmons wants to let George and Kathy know that the demon in their home is unhappy with the blessing they attempted. On the night of the blessing, while the Lutz family is soundly asleep, agents, led by Agent Simmons, make their way from the England home to the Lutz home. Agent Simmons picks the lock, and the agents enter the Lutz home. The agents remove the front door from its hinges and then the basement door from its hinges. Both doors are left hanging open to make it appear as a force came from the basement and blew out the doors. The agents simply walk out of the Lutz home and return to the England home. Agent Simmons allows 30 minutes to pass so the Lutz home temperature will drop to near freezing. As Kathy begins to wake from the coldness, Agent Simmons uses the powerful sound projection technology to fill George and Kathy's bedroom with the loud sound of an explosion. George and Kathy are both jolted out of their sleep by the sound of the explosion. George asks, "What the hell was that?" Kathy says, "I don't know, but it's freezing in here." George and Kathy cautiously venture down to the first floor only to find their front door blown off its hinges. George also discovers their basement door is in the same condition. After carefully inspecting both doors, George tells Kathy the demon must have been angered by the blessing and retaliated by blowing both doors off their hinges. The next night while George is sleeping, Agent Simmons attacks George with the same type of directed energy weapon that was used to incapacitate Butch DeFeo during the murder of his family. George wakes and finds that he is unable to move, and the room is spinning, and he is unable to fixate on objects. George believes he is having a stroke. Seconds later, another agent uses the sound projection technology to project audible sounds of banging noises at George while he is lying helpless in his bed.
I'm laying in bed. I'm unable to get up. I can hear my children's beds overhead of me slamming up and down on the floor. And I can't get up to help them.
Kathy's brother Jimmy is getting married. Kathy invites Jimmy to spend the night at the Lutz home before his next day's wedding. Jimmy accepts Kathy's offer. Jimmy has $1,500 in cash to pay the wedding caterer. Jimmy carefully counts the money multiple times in the Lutz living room. Jimmy places a band around the money. Jimmy then places the money in his suit jacket to ensure he is prepared for his big day tomorrow. Jimmy leaves his jacket on the sofa before retiring for the night. Agent Simmons, carefully monitoring the situation in the Lutz home, wants to give Jimmy a wedding surprise he will never forget. Agent Simmons knows that Jimmy losing the $1,500 will cause the Lutz's home to descend into chaos. In the middle of the night, when the Lutz family and Jimmy are all soundly asleep, Agent Simmons makes his way from the England house to the Lutz house. Agent Simmons picks the lock on the front door and enters the Lutz home. Agent Simmons only removes the money from Jimmy's jacket and quickly leaves the Lutz home, locks the door, and then returns to the England home with the money. In the morning, as Jimmy finishes his final preparations for the wedding, he decides to make sure the money for the caterer is in his jacket. Jimmy goes into meltdown when he discovers the money is missing. Jimmy begins frantically searching through his jacket and pants but is unable to locate the money. George and Kathy search the sofa by removing the cushions and looking under the sofa and other furniture. With time running out, George saves the day by offering to pay the caterer with a personal check, and he will look more thoroughly for the money after the wedding. The Lutz family attends Jimmy's wedding. Kathy bumps into Aunt Helena at the wedding. Aunt Helena apologizes to Kathy for abruptly leaving the other day. Aunt Helena explains that when she got a half block away from Kathy's home, she became violently ill. Kathy tells Aunt Helena not to worry. Kathy then invites Aunt Helena to return to the Lutz home. At that moment, a look of pure fear enveloped Aunt Helena's face. Aunt Helena hastily tells Kathy she is way too busy and says some other time and quickly walks away, leaving Kathy with a look of puzzlement again. While the Lutz family is away at the wedding, Agent Simmons makes his way back to the Lutz home. Agent Simmons picks the lock and re-enters the Lutz home. Agent Simmons puts only the band that was around Jimmy's $1,500 under the sofa for George to find. Agent Simmons quickly exits the Lutz home and locks the door. Agent Simmons makes his way back to the England home. After returning from the wedding, George, fearing the check he wrote to the caterer will bounce, decides to tear his living room apart to find Jimmy's money. After an exhausting search, George only finds a money band on the floor but no actual money. George yells out in pure frustration at the top of his lungs, "Where the hell is it?" Agent Simmons in the neighboring England home breaks into uncontrollable laughter after George screams. Agent Simmons says, "Don't worry, George, I'll put Jimmy's money in a safe place." Agent Simmons gets up, walks over to the burning fireplace, and then tosses Jimmy's $1,500 into the flames. Agent Simmons has been playing another game with George and Kathy. George and Kathy have a statue of a lion, which they keep on a table in the living room. When the Lutz family is fast asleep or when they are all away from their home, Agent Simmons enters the Lutz home to carry out diabolical mischief on the Lutz family to trick them into believing their home is haunted. One trick done to the Lutz family by Agent Simmons is to move their lion statue, another position on the table, or to another room in the house. Agent Simmons especially likes to put the lion statue in a place where George normally walks so he will trip over it. Agent Simmons wants George and Kathy to believe the lion statue is cursed by a demonic force. Morning after morning, George wakes to find the lion statue has moved in the night. After tripping over the lion statue one morning and cutting his foot, George grabs the lion statue, takes it outside, and then tosses it into the garbage can. George slams the lid down on the garbage can and says, "That's the end of that." At night, when the Lutz family is soundly asleep, Agent Simmons makes his way over to the Lutz home. Agent Simmons takes the lion statue out of the Lutz's garbage can, walks over to the front door, picks the lock, and then enters the Lutz home. Agent Simmons places the lion statue in its original spot on the table in the living room for George to discover in the morning. Agent Simmons exits the Lutz home and makes his way back to the England home. In the morning, George enters the living room and finds the lion statue in plain sight on the table. George is dumbfounded at how the lion statue got back into the house. George believes there is a demonic entity at work in his home. George asks the entity, "What do you want from us?" And then in a moment of rage, screams, "This is my house."
What do you want from us? God damn it, this is my house!
Agent Simmons and his colleagues, monitoring from the England home, go into uncontrollable laughter after George loses control.
This was a lion, a ceramic lion that my wife Kathy had given me, and we actually threw this out at one point, and it came back into the house on its own and was there the next day again inside. Kids said they didn't bring it in. It would kind of move around when you weren't watching it. You would leave the room, no one else would be in there, you'd go out of the house, you'd come home, it would have moved. Sometimes just a little bit, sometimes it would change rooms. We tried to get rid of it, it didn't exactly work out.
Did you get really bitten by a statue, and was there really blood trickling down the stairs? And
Kind of call. I tripped over the statue, and but it wasn't supposed to be there. The lion. We threw that out, and it came back in the house.
The next day, Agent Simmons fires low-level ultrasound into George's back to make him experience temperature fluctuations in his home. George experiences sudden temperature increases in the area of his back while he is standing, sitting, and lying in bed. George begins to complain about cold spots in his home. Only George is affected.
Extreme fluctuations in temperature.
Agent Simmons makes the Lutz's home heating system malfunction. Agent Simmons targets the thermostat on the wall and passes energy through it to make the heating system shut down. George looks at the thermostat on the wall and it reads 80 degrees, but the house feels like it is 50 degrees. George calls the serviceman, but Agent Simmons discontinues the attack 1 hour before the serviceman arrives, and the heating system returns to normal. The serviceman finds no problem with the heating system. George becomes obsessed with keeping the house warm. George begins to constantly chop wood to keep the fireplace burning.
George is attacked by a sensation of intense cold. He compulsively builds fires in the living room fireplace, but he can never get warm enough.
He became obsessed with how much firewood there was, and then would there be enough to keep burning, that he would be continually going about the fireplace, checking the fire.
George's personal hygiene begins to greatly suffer, and he isolates himself from his wife and children. George screams in the middle of the night, "I'm coming apart."
Oh, Mother of God, I'm coming apart!
George and Kathy are completely convinced that there is something wrong with their new home.
During the first 2 weeks of January 1976, a series of terrifying and mind-numbing events finally convince the Lutzes that some evil force is residing in their house.
George and Kathy decide that the escalating paranormal activity in their new home has reached a level where it is no longer safe for their family. On the night of January 14, 1976, George and Kathy frantically wake their children and put them in the Lutz's van. George grabs the family dog, Harry, and puts the dog in the back of the van. George gets in the van and tells his family to keep watch to ensure Jody the flying pig isn't following them. George puts the van in gear and floors the accelerator, screeching his tires, and tearing off the property onto Ocean Avenue. George races down Ocean Avenue telling his family, "We're never coming back here again."
On January 14, 1976, 28 days after moving in, the Lutzes flee 112 Ocean Avenue, abandoning the house and everything they own.
The Lutz's neighbors are awoken by all the commotion outside their homes as the Lutz family makes their getaway. One neighbor looks out his window and sees the Lutz van racing away and says, "It hasn't even been 30 days yet, Agent Simmons kept his word." Agent Simmons has one last surprise for the Lutz family as a going-away present. Agent Simmons, with advance knowledge the Lutz family was preparing to abandon their home, has the mobile unit waiting on Ocean Avenue. As the Lutz family van races down Ocean Avenue to escape the demonic forces of their home, the mobile unit begins firing infrasonic bullets at the side of the Lutz family van. As George is driving, the sounds of loud smacking noises on the side of the van begin emanating throughout the vehicle. The smacking noises sound like a legion of demons pounding on the sides of the van. George asks, "What are those smacking noises?" George looks out the side windows and the rear-view mirrors but sees nothing. Kathy screams, "Oh no, it must be Jody." George screams, "Jody must be on the roof of the van." George floors the accelerator and begins to evasively swerve the van back and forth to shake Jody off the van. The racing engine and screeching tires can be heard throughout the neighborhood, shattering the tranquility of the night. As the Lutz family van violently swerves side to side and tears down Ocean Avenue, it goes out of range of the mobile unit and the smacking noises begin to subside. George says, "I think Jody was shaken off the roof and we are okay. Thank God, we got away with our lives." The Lutz family abandons their new home after only 28 days, leaving all their possessions behind. George and Kathy state publicly that unseen supernatural forces inside their new home made it impossible for them to continue to live there.
The sense for our very lives was there, and we chose to go.
We left to the house because the house became uninhabitable. As far as we were concerned, there was no reason to stay there anymore. There were too many things happening too often and confronting us constantly. But those specific events are not something that we try to sit down and explain to anyone else.
To celebrate the Lutz family abandoning their new home, Jody the Flying Pig takes a victory lap around the now abandoned Lutz home. The investigation begins. A television reporter named Laura Didio contacts George and Kathy Lutz and graciously offers to guide them through the complexities of the paranormal universe.
With the Lutzes underground, interest in the Amityville Horror story was building, and New York TV station Channel 5 were determined to get the scoop.
I got in touch with George Lutz and said, "Your family needs help," because they were clearly terrified.
Laura called in a celebrated pair of psychic investigators based in Connecticut, Ed and Lorraine Warren.
The type of work that we do is investigation into the paranormal, the supernatural, the preternatural, from haunting phenomena caused by human spirits or through poltergeist activity or the demonic inhuman hauntings. We've worked on numerous possession cases and exorcisms, and Warner Brothers has the rights to our life.
Laura Didio successfully convinces George and Kathy that they need help from the very best minds in the paranormal field. As news media attention to the Lutz haunting intensifies, George brings in a team of paranormal experts known as the Psychic Posse to investigate his home.
The Lutzes moved in with Kathy's mother, and George took steps to get the house investigated.
The Psychic Posse consists of a demonologist, clairvoyant, several psychics, and paranormal researchers. Agent Simmons enjoys tricking what he considers social misfits in society into believing they have supernatural powers. When the paranormal people claim to feel the presence of spirits or vibrations, what they are actually experiencing is the effects of being attacked with sound which they cannot see or hear but only feel. Agent Simmons and his colleagues attack the paranormal people through walls with sonic weapons to trick them into believing they have extraordinary powers. The paranormal people are carefully selected and then manipulated. Agent Simmons constantly jokes to his colleagues that if he had his way, he would maroon all of the paranormal people on the island of misfit toys and be done with them forever. But since maroonment is not possible, Agent Simmons must deal with the paranormal people in other ways. Agent Simmons and his colleagues have invested tremendous resources in the Psychic Posse over the years, so their participation in the investigation of the Lutz home will be a real pleasure. On February 24, 1976, Ed and Lorraine Warren, two members of the Psychic Posse, arrive at the Lutz home to begin the initial investigation. Agent Simmons and his colleagues are set up in the neighboring England house and consider it a great honor to have what the paranormal field considers the top ghost hunters involved in the investigation.
On February 24, 1976, demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, accompanied by a television news crew, investigate the abandoned Lutz home in Amityville, New York.
When I walked into that home, I knew that I was dealing with a tremendously powerful evil force. Evil that doesn't always personify itself in a home like that.
Ed and Lorraine Warren enter the Lutz home. As Ed is inspecting the basement, Agent Simmons targets him as he is walking down the basement stairs and attacks him with a sonic weapon. As Ed is walking down the basement stairs, he suddenly feels some invisible force coming down on him like a waterfall, dragging him to the floor, and he also sees distortions in his eyes. Unknown to Ed is that he is being attacked with sound that he cannot hear or see, and the distortions that he sees are the sound entering his eyes, causing pressure on his optic nerves.
While inspecting the basement, Ed Warren claims to have encountered a terrifying, inhuman presence.
Suddenly it felt as though I were under a heavy waterfall, and the pressure was driving me down to the floor. And I commanded in the name of Jesus Christ, what was there to reveal its identity? There was hundreds of pinpoints of what I can only describe as electricity. I understood and knew right at that point that what we were dealing with was no ghost.
Ed quickly turns around and runs up the basement stairs. Ed finds Lorraine in the living room with her hands extended forward trying to capture vibrations. Ed grabs both Lorraine's hands and frantically tells her, "There is a demon here. We're going to need the entire psychic posse for this one." Ed tells Lorraine, "Let's get out of here and bring back the entire posse to battle this demon." Ed then takes Lorraine by one hand and quickly leads her out the front door. Ed and Lorraine get in their car. Ed quickly drives to the end of the driveway, where reporters anxiously await an interview with the Warrens. Ed abruptly stops the car next to the reporters. Ed rolls down his window and the reporters rush over to the Warrens' car. Ed yells out to the reporters, "Run for your lives." Lorraine then yells out, "It's a demon. Save yourselves. You get out of here." Ed then floors the car's accelerator and tears away, nearly sideswiping the parked news van. The reporters are dumbfounded at what they are witnessing as the Warrens' car burns rubber and speeds away down Ocean Avenue. One reporter asks, "What is going on around here? We were promised an interview by the Warrens. Is this just a publicity stunt?" In the England home, Agent Simmons and his colleagues break out in laughter after seeing the Warrens tear away down Ocean Avenue. Agent Simmons says, "Now the news reporters have some hard news to write about." Ed and Lorraine fear returning to the Lutz home but reluctantly decide to return only with the entire psychic posse. Ed and Lorraine reason that the combined psychic powers of the entire psychic posse will be enough to battle the demon residing at 112 Ocean Avenue.
We felt it was in our best interest never to go back in that house again. But we did go back in order to finish the research that we were doing.
At the Lutz's request, the Warrens returned to the Amityville house on the night of March 6, 1976, along with a contingent of psychics, paranormal researchers, and reporters.
The entire psychic posse assembles at the Lutz home on the night of March 6, 1976, with a team of news reporters. Agent Simmons and his colleagues have again set up in the neighboring England house, and they are all excited that they will have the opportunity to manipulate the entire psychic posse and have it all recorded by the news media. It's a dream come true for Agent Simmons. George Lutz arrives, but because he is so terrified of the house, he will not set foot on the property, so he gives the house key to a reporter at the edge of the property and quickly jumps back in his car and speeds away down Ocean Avenue.
George Lutz met us at the edge of the property. He did not even want to step foot onto the grounds.
The investigation begins with a psychic conducting a séance. Agent Simmons targets the psychic's chest and fires an infrasonic laser into her chest, causing her to experience tightness of the chest and an irregular heartbeat. The psychic states that she feels the force coming at her and it's making her heart speed up.
It's nothing. It's whatever's here. Whatever is here.
You're trying to harm them?
Yes, and it's something that comes at you and makes your heart speed up, that kind of thing.
Agent Simmons then targets her stomach area and fires the infrasonic laser into her stomach, so she becomes sick to the stomach and eventually forces her to leave the table. Later in the evening, Agent Simmons fires an infrasonic laser into a cameraman's chest, causing the cameraman to experience severe chest pains.
Our cameraman, Steve, got to the landing on the second floor, and all of a sudden he bent over, clutching his chest. He had stabbing chest pains.
After the psychic posse finishes investigating the third floor of the Lutz home, Agent Simmons fires an infrasonic bullet at Ed Warren while he is walking down the stairs, causing him to lunge backward.
After the seance was over, we proceeded downstairs. At that point, Ed had his crucifix and he was leading Lorraine. He stopped at one point, almost as if he was like thrown back by a gust of wind. And he later described it as being assailed by, I think, a legion of demons.
After Ed Warren is attacked, Agent Simmons targets Lorraine Warren's chest area and fires an infrasonic laser into her chest.
It's like the rush of water against my chest, holding you back so powerfully.
Lorraine Warren is overwhelmed by the vibrations in the Lutz home.
The vibrations were outrageous.
Lorraine Warren is asked to conduct a seance, but she feels she could be placing herself in jeopardy, so she declines.
They asked me at one point to see if we should hold a seance. I was a little bit leery about doing that. I felt I was putting myself in jeopardy.
About an hour later, Agent Simmons uses sound projection technology to project sizzling sounds at a psychic who is sprinkling holy water in areas of the Lutz home.
So I took the holy water and I opened it and I said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And I went like that. And you could hear like water on a hot stove go.
After investigating the Lutz home for several hours, the psychic posse is completely convinced the Lutz home is haunted.
It was a dangerous, dangerous night during that period of time. Yes, it was very intense that night. The way people were affected was just crazy. It was a horribly foreboding type of a feeling throughout the whole house. You knew that this house was infested by something other than human spirits.
Lorraine, during the seance, said that she felt like there was some evil here that was from the bowels of the earth. It was not just the murdered spirits of the dead DeFeos.
I could see bodies all lined up, or with white sheets over them.
I got the impression of like hooded figures like monks right outside the door, closing the door well, looking in at me. I thought, uh-oh.
I get to the top and I go into a room and Marvin Scott said to me, "What is it? What is it?" I said to him, "I hope this is as close to hell as I'll ever get." I said, "I hope this is as close to hell as I'll ever get."
However, the two reporters who are covering the investigation are not convinced at all.
Again, as a reporter, I have to tell you, I did not see anything, I did not feel anything, other than the reaction of Ed, Lorraine, the other psychics, and the other people around me.
I was prepared for anything, and matter of fact, what reporter would not love to have an exclusive interview with a ghost? The only voices I heard that night was that of my crew, wanting to know when we can eat the sandwiches we brought along. Saw no oozing of any substance from the walls, the toilets, no flies. We saw none of that.
Jody the Flying Pig was a complete no-show on the night of the investigation. Agent Simmons wants to give the reporters and the psychic posse a show at the completion of the investigation. Agent Simmons wants to give the appearance that the neighbors are fed up with the media attention to 112 Ocean Avenue. Agent Simmons asked Andy and Agnes England to wait at Henry's bar and only return home when signaled by an agent. As Agent Simmons monitors the activity in the Lutz home, he notices the investigation is wrapping up for the night. Agent Simmons sends word to his colleague at Henry's bar to have the Englands return home. About 10 minutes later, Andy and Agnes arrive home and pull into their driveway. Andy and Agnes immediately notice the TV van in the Lutz's driveway and a gathering of people around the van. Agnes, who has had a few drinks, tells her husband, "Let's get the show on the road." Agnes then jumps out of the car and begins screaming in the direction of the Lutz home, "Ronnie, come out and play with your guns." The reporters and psychic posse are frozen in place watching the lady next door, who appears to be intoxicated, running up and down her property screaming for Ronnie to come out and play. Andy then gets out of his car, approaches his wife, and then gives the appearance he is trying to physically restrain his wife and force her inside their home. Andy, when inside his home, closes the door and then releases his wife. Andy picks up the phone to call the police so he can report a disturbance at 112 Ocean Avenue. Andy, after reporting the disturbance, hangs up the phone and then everyone inside the England home breaks out in laughter. Agent Simmons tells Andy and Agnes they both deserve the Best Actor award. Several minutes later, the police arrive and begin to interrogate the reporters and psychic posse. After 30 minutes of back and forth arguing with the police, the reporters and psychic posse decide to heed the police's advice to immediately call it a night and leave.
We were packing up and the next door neighbors, the man and his wife, came home. And the wife was obviously drunk, very drunk. And she starts running up and down the side lawn between the two houses saying, "Woohoo, Ronnie, you want to come out and play guns?"
Oh my goodness.
And we're all looking at her. At that point, the husband comes out, grabs her and drags her into the house. And the next thing you know, 5 or 10 minutes later, the cops show up wanting to know who we are.
Laura Didio declares the Lutz haunting the perfect psychic storm.
Whatever happened, it was a confluence of events and personalities, and it meshed to form the perfect psychic storm.
With the investigation now officially over, the psychic posse made public their findings. Ed and Lorraine Warren give the Lutz home the highest rating possible for a haunted house.
This was no ordinary haunted house. This, on a scale of 1 to 10, was a 10.
The Amityville house was the most haunted house we were ever in.
Ed further states that the Lutz haunting is the gold standard in haunted houses. The psychic posse delivers the bad news to George and Kathy that the paranormal forces inhabiting their home are too powerful to be driven out even by the psychic posse. The psychic posse's simple advice to George and Kathy is, "Get out." After carefully considering all their options, George and Kathy decide to heed the advice of the psychic posse and abandon their new home. George and Kathy, having no other choice, return their new home back to the bank.
Despite the certainty of a huge financial loss, George and Kathy decide to return the house to the bank.
The Lutzes never returned to 112 Ocean Avenue. The bank reclaimed the property, and their possessions were auctioned off. George and Kathy moved to California, claiming that they needed to escape the influence of the house and the glare of publicity as their story gathered momentum.
Amityville becomes a sensation, and it's everywhere. It's in the news. It's all over Long Island. It's on the tips of everyone's tongue. Have you heard about this case, which is a compendium of all of the most horrific things that have ever happened in the paranormal, all in one case?
The psychics came out of the woodwork. Exorcists, parapsychologists, vampirologists, every one of them came out of the woodwork with a theory that they knew exactly what had happened.
George and Kathy decide to flee the state and move as far away from Amityville as possible, to the opposite coast. George and Kathy will leave all their worldly possessions behind and get on an airplane to California and start a new life, never again returning to Amityville. George's getaway plan is to get to the airport without being followed by Jody the flying pig. Everyone riding in the Lutz family van keeps an eye out for Jody as George uses the skills he acquired serving in the military to evade Jody. At the airport, George ditches the Lutz family van. George gives the Lutz van's keys and signed title to the parking attendant and tells him, "Keep it, it's yours." The Lutz family boards their flight and George gloats by saying, "Jody is no match for me. No flying pig is going to outsmart George Lutz." George theorizes that because of the distance, Jody the flying pig simply will not be able to follow them to California. George is mistaken. Jody in pursuit of the Lutz family. End of Episode 2, The Diversion. Please watch Episode 3, The Denial. Author's note, a special thanks to the now deceased cop who once lived in my community. Without the cop providing the information on the classified technology, this presentation would not have been possible. The cop's family is powerful and influential in my town, and the cop's family ties to the town go back many generations. An important town landmark is named in honor of the cop's family. The cop was also rumored to even have ties to the CIA. The cop's family once owned the property on which my house was built. The street the cop and I lived on is the name of a body of water. The cop died in 2013. Please visit hightechharassment.com.